In Latin, cura means care. It doesn't mean cure until later, but it eventually comes on to mean cure as well. So guess what? In English, the words cure and care come from the same root. They come from this root cura. So they are connected with each other. So the idea, the Hippocratic Oath, the idea that you care for your patient and all that, well, you might as well also try to cure your patient. Care and cure, they go together, right? So when you are careful, you are full of care. And when you are full of care, you're full of what? Prevention of something bad from happening. So in that respect, it's the opposite of a cure. You haven't effed up yet, so you don't need a cure yet for what you're being careful about, right? You're preventing something, but it's the same idea, right? It's the same idea. You're being careful, so you don't need a cure. It's a good way to look at it. And there's the doctor helping out this dude, hopefully curing him if he's sick, and that's the idea. I like that. I don't know why, but it's interesting to me. It's pretty rare that you'll have that A and that U coming from the same root, meaning two different words, but related to each other because of the root. And then, just when you thought we were done with the combination, the comparison of those ways of using the same root, we have another one. 8, you etymological experts already know, means to do or make. To what? To do or apply care towards something. Right? To do care, to make care, whatever you want to say in that respect. To care for. It means you're taking care. It means you're making, careful decisions, choices, etc. Okay, curating, being very careful and justifying, making it clear why it is that you've chosen the things that you've chosen to feature in the museum or in the music list at Spotify, whatever. Good enough? Okay, now we get rid of these pictures. And we get to Curious. Who's this? All right, we all grew up with Curious George. He was curious about everything. What does it mean to be curious? Yeah, it means to give a damn. It means to actually care about learning something as opposed to doing it for units and a grade and a degree and a job and a house with a picket fence and a family with a dog or two and children, 2.5 children, etc. It means really giving a damn. It means putting your energy toward learning for its own sake. Secure. When you are secure, or you're using security, which you braggers, you know what the Y means. It means state of, or it means being, doesn't it? Security, the state of what? The state of securing at your house. You want to make sure that nothing gets stolen or whatever, okay? How do you get rid of that fear? Through security, through getting rid of your care about losing things, all right? So say means away, right? Say away from care, like you said. Away from care, not having care. So when you have a good security system, that means that you don't have to worry and you're set and the alarm is on or something like that, okay? Your car won't get stolen. You're secure in the knowledge that your car is not going to be stolen because you have a great alarm on it, etc. Okay? So no one knows this. You know why? Because secure is a negation of something. It's not saying that you are safe. It's the opposite of that, which is kind of interesting. When you are careful about something, you're full of care. All right? So you can be, kind of hilariously, you can be careful to have good security. Right? So you can be full of active care about not having to have care. A sinecure, you know sine means without, and you know that care means care, so you know that it means without care. It's a noun that means without care. But there is no way for a Martian to know when he, she, it, they, or whatever a Martian is, comes down to Earth and sees this word, they will see, even if they're just extremely well-versed in etymology, listening in, eavesdropping on our classes and learning all the roots and prefixes and suffixes we learn, still will not be able to guess what it means because it sounds too generic, without care, a without care thing. Okay, good, now I know what the word means, wrong. And the GRE people know that. They know that you're going to, if you know etymology, oh, good for you. You know what sine means, you know what care means, we're going to nail you anyway. because we're going to put up things that have to do with not caring, and they're going to fool you by doing it. No, it means one thing and one thing only. It means a job that is easy, period. A sinecure means an easy job, a job that you don't have to worry about. You sit around and laugh all the time, have a great time. It's a sinecure. And it's almost always a positive word. Okay, it's almost always used in a context where, oh man, I love my job, it's such a sinecure. All right, manicure, pedicure, what's going on? Very simple. Hand is man, like manus, mano a mano, etc. Pedicure is foot. And so a pedicure and a manicure are simply caring for the hand, caring for the hands, caring for the feet. Very simple. Accurate. Making, or doing, but in this case probably making, care. Mr. Add, over there. Yep, ack is add. Care toward, right? Making care toward something is to be accurate. Isn't that nice to know? Right? Right? Yeah, it doesn't mean being correct. It means being careful. You can be wrong and you can be accurate. Oops. When can that be? In philosophy. Look at Heidegger. Look at Plato. Right? They never claimed to always have the answers, but they were accurate. Why? Because they were true to their thinking. And their thinking was an effort that was meaningful and had significance, even though they may not have had answers. Look into that. Kind of interesting. All right, this is a biggie, you guys. Real big. And unfortunately, we don't yet have the root leg, meaning to read, choose, and various other things, from which the Latin word for law arises. But there is a distinction in Rome, ancient Rome, between lex, which is the word for law, okay, like statute, and one of the forms is legis, from which words like legal arise. And this word, use, in Latin. And then the alternate form is juris, okay, it means of the use. So what does use mean? It means right. It means right in the sense of the Bill of Rights. It's a big word. It's hardcore. This is a big-time word that has to do with the very things that the people who came up with the notion of liberalism in its original incarnation in 18th century France, or at least its most famous, incarnation, first most famous incarnation, were thinking of when they were talking about what freedom means. Freedom equals assuring people their rights, their iures, their uses. Okay, but the plural is iures in Latin. Okay, so use means a right, such as in the Bill of Rights. It doesn't mean right in the sense of right versus left directly, but indirectly it does. Okay, you'll see. And it doesn't mean right in the sense of right versus wrong directly, but indirectly it does. All right, so we're talking, these are all connected. This idea of right versus left, right versus wrong, and right in the sense of having rights, okay, versus what? Having your rights taken away from you. There are some connections between these things. We start with the most basic of the words that we're going to be looking at that derive from this root, and that is a juror. Okay. Now, the first thing to think of when you think of a juror, the or just means one who. Someone who does something, just like IAN, musician, juror. One who what? One who protects rights. That's what a juror is supposed to be. When someone's in court and the jury decides whether they're guilty or not guilty, the idea here, when you say that this person is not guilty, in effect what you're saying is, no, we're not taking the rights away from this person because we don't believe they did anything that warranted that. Jurisprudence is a cool word. I'm going to teach you how to love this word as opposed to be scared of it. If you saw this written, you would be, oh gosh, one of those old fogey words that I don't need to know and that is going to die out. Probably true. It's not used enough to maybe survive. But it's nice to know where it comes from, and guess what? Flex your muscles, because you are prepared to know what it means. It is short, it's a contraction of, is another way to put it, for jurisprovidence. Providence, as you remember, to be provident means to see ahead, to look ahead, all right? And the juris means of right, right? So a right, someone who jurisprudence is seeing ahead what is right, looking, being able to look ahead at what is right, and by extension, to have knowledge of what is right, okay? So quite often, prudence is a contraction of that, and we could have added prudence, by the way, when we looked at the root video, vid. Remember that one? To see? We could have very well put providence in there, okay? Because it means the state of looking ahead, seeing ahead. So jurisprudence means seeing ahead what is right. So it's the discipline of whatever has to do with law courts and being a jury. Jurisdiction is a fancy term that you hear used a lot. And when someone says, that's not in my jurisdiction, usually you're talking about the distinction between the jurisdiction of state law versus federal law. And regardless of what your position is about all this stuff, this is a big issue when it comes to the most recent legalization of marijuana in California, right? Because there's this jurisdictional conflict between the fact that it's legal in its state jurisdiction, but illegal, do you guys know, in the federal jurisdiction. So there's state versus federal jurisdiction. That's the most famous and most important distinction to make. And so what does it mean? Diction. You guys know that the ION means being or state of. The DIC means to say. It's like dictate, to say, okay? And then the juris means the right. So it means the state of saying what is right. In other words, the power to say what is right and what is wrong within a given context. Or, as it says here, the official power to make legal decisions and judgments. Federal courts had no jurisdiction over the case, is an example of that. Okay, you guys? So the saying of what is right, the state of saying what is right is jurisdiction, right and wrong. Now a judge, the word judge uses that same root as jurisdiction. The dico means to say in Latin, as we'll get later, but because we're including these words, definitely learn it as a root for the sake of these two important words. And then judge is a contraction of jus dico. Dico, or at least the dic part. Say what is right. A judge is someone given the authority to say what is right and wrong. Wrong by implication. To say what is right. That's what a judge is. The emphasis is on being, given the authority to say what is right and wrong. Not interpret, not whatever other things, but actually to say, to enforce what is right and wrong. We often talk about the executive branch being the one that executes things. Well, implied in the very word judge is a kind of execution, a saying what's right and what's wrong. Okay? Good to know. Now we get to the word just, and then other words, as you can probably guess, come from it, justice, etc. Justus, okay, is just an adjective in Latin. Justus, justus, okay, that means what? Based on or behaving according to what is morally right and fair is the way that it's defined here. But what we should do, so when we say morally right and fair, it points to the fact that you're talking about the root, meaning right in the sense of Bill of Rights, the rights that you have, that you protect yourself against having infringed by the government within a representative democracy like the United States, at least theoretically, okay? But it also points out that connection I alluded to earlier between this idea of right in the sense of Bill of Rights, the rights that you have as a citizen, and this idea of right versus wrong. So here it says, based on or behaving according to what is morally right and fair, which is another way to say based on or behaving according to what is consistent with your rights as a citizen. right and wrong. The very notion, when it comes to law, courts, and governments, etc., of what is just is measured by whether or not it conforms to your rights. I don't know if you find it interesting or not, but there it is. Okay. Justice is blind is a phrase you often hear. And what does it mean? It means justice doesn't discriminate against what? Depends on what historical period you're talking about. Today we would point out maybe men and women or other things like that. You know, things are becoming a lot more complicated when it comes to all this, right? Or races, or creeds, or whatever. The point here is that that justice is supposed to defend the iures, the rights of all, without discrimination. And we know what discrimination means. The crimin thing, maybe we don't. I forget if we had that. Yeah, kerno. It's all connected to kerno, meaning to sift. Discrimination, just sift away, right? So justice is supposed to protect you are not being discriminated against, sifted away from the rest of the population and the rest of the citizenry, and to maintain your rights. It comes from justitia in Latin, the very word. That's what the is. So I won't ask for a suffix if I give you this, because that's just a linguistic thing. Very interestingly, in a court of law, when someone perjures themselves or engages in perjury, the state of doing that, doing that, what does it mean? It means going through the law. Whenever we have a word that uses the prefix per in a negative way, you can metaphorize it, make it into a metaphor, and think of it kind of like a knife or some sharp object sticking through it. And that's what's going on here. You swear like this guy's doing, and he's crossing his fingers. The idea being going through, violating, going through with force. What? The rights? His rights? No. What's going on here? It has to do with the fact that as time goes on, this root, meaning right, is extended also to mean is turned into a verb, meaning to swear. To perjure is to go through what? Swearing. There's a connection there between the idea of swearing and the idea of having rights. Why? Because your swearing only means anything if you are a citizen who has rights. Right? If you're playing that game of society and government, if you're playing the game that there truly is this conformity of the citizens who belong to this society, then, and I say game not in at all a sarcastic way. I mean, this is something that is all about ideas. There's no such thing as a state that is there that you can pick up like a piece of bread. This is all in our heads. This is all something that we all agree to, consent to. Next root, sent. Okay. So the idea here is that because you are a citizen who has rights, your swearing, your euroing, right, based on use, right, means something. Without rights, without us all having rights and protecting our rights and being protected from a tyrannical government, with our rights would be meaningless. That's the connection. When you adjust something, in this case, the just is meaning right in the sense of correct, okay? Without respect to government and citizenry and rights, as in Bill of Rights, okay? So you're abstracting it to some extent. You're genericizing it. You're making it mean something in an everyday sense, as opposed to in a specialized legal and governmental and political sense. So you adjust your tie, you righten it toward the way it should be. Okay, the odd would be toward, and then the just is right. So you make it right, and the just men is just state of or being. That's one of our suffixes. Making something right toward the model of what it should conform to. Everybody has this idea that a tie needs to look a certain way when you're wearing it, and so that's the idea. Odd, odd that, toward that idea.